Peter Navarro, all the rah-rah on Wall Street, because they want the easy money terms to return, they missed a big part of the story yesterday was about core inflation and how that's going to affect the American people. Walk me through that, brother.
Steve, it's very simple. We're looking at a couple of years at least of stagflation misery based on numbers that Wall Street's trying to put a rosy spin on. Here's all you need to know, Posse. The Federal Reserve sets its interest rates policy based on an expectation that core inflation will be at 2% or lower. And as long as it's above that, the Fed's going to keep the screws to you on your mortgage rates, on your credit card debt, and all of that. What do we have? Numbers came out. It was 5.3%, Steve, on the non-core rate. That's more than twice as high as the target, and it takes years to bring that down. It's as simple as that. How are they going to bring it down? By keeping interest rates high, mortgage rates high, and growth slower than it would otherwise be. Black, brown, blue-collar workers are going to suffer from fewer jobs and lower wages. Middle-class families won't be able to move up into homes because of those mortgage rates. So it's as simple as that. Don't let anybody tell you it's bullish.
It's all yes. Here's the thing. You got $1 trillion right now credit card debt, and the younger generation got the highest.
Yeah.
60% of the American people living a paycheck to paycheck. You got $19 trillion of total consumer debt. That's all going to stay at these levels, even if the Fed doesn't increase. You're being destroyed economically. And you don't need Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro to tell you that. You see it every day.
You know it. And big deal. It's like some of the food and gasoline prices are coming down from skyrocketing heights. We're still feeling all of this pain. And again, the numbers, Steve, 5.3%. That's the core rate right now. And it's a 2% Fed target. So it takes a long time to shrink that down. The other thing I know you want to talk about is this Janet Yellen thing because it's related. The fact that she gets up, talks at Congress, they say, hey, the world's de-dollarizing, and she says, oh, don't worry about it. There's going to be a little bit of that, but the dollar's still strong. Here's the lacuna, the dog that didn't park in her speech. She didn't look those congressmen in the eye and say, look, communist China and Russia are launching a frontal attack on the dollar, trying to create a BRIC zone, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and a lot of other countries to get them off the dollar. Why? Because they don't want to be exposed to U.S. sanctions, which we have misused poorly from a tactical point of view. And she didn't want to acknowledge that fact. And by the way, the congressman could have done a far better job talking about it, because you and I, Steve, know it all boils down to communist China and what their grand strategy is. They have one, Biden does it, and the dollar is a key part of that.
But hang on, it's an economic warfare, but here's the thing. How do you blame the BRICS, and how do you blame the Russians? How do you blame the Chinese when these deficits out of control? Remember, the report yesterday was that the trailing 12 months is what you got, $2.1 trillion deficit. I think it's $800 billion already this year. The numbers are so far off, and here's why. Government expenditures are about 25%. I'm going to give you some complicated math here. Get your number 2 pencil out. Get it ready? 25%. 25. I'm a school the Harvard professor
here. I need my number 3 pencil here.
25% of all GDP expenditure are government expenditures. That's what the Republicans just gave Biden. Hold it. The tax revenues used to be 19%, are now back to historical levels of 17% and dropping. Why? Because the World Bank tells us, the Congressional Budget Office tells us growth is going to be about 1 to 1.1%. Peter Navarro's stagflation. Ergo, declining GDP means lower tax revenues of these structures. We're at 17%. That gap, Mr. 8%, that's how you're having $2.1 trillion. We're going to blow through this. Why did we structure the first deal that we didn't love, at least had $1.5 trillion, or next April or May, whatever came first? Because we knew we were going to be back here in October because they're going to blow through it.
Yeah.
This all is
Don't
inextricably linked, and this is why. Hang on.
Don't get me started on why McCarthy's still Speaker of the House, okay? Don't get me started on that, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm robbing this train. Just take your number 2 weeks. Keep writing down numbers, okay? Hold it, because I'm about to get to the Chinese part. Yellen doesn't sit there. She should be throwing down hard yesterday saying, no, we're going to defend the dollar as a prime reserve currency. Even if you don't like the fact that we're prime reserve and it brings responsibilities, right now, if we don't have that, we're Argentina. Because guess what? Then you can't sell the bonds you need to finance this. Then they don't need the dollar for every exchange. That's the best export we have. I understand it ain't great, but it's better than the alternative now. That's why we have to rebuild this economy. Yellen not doing it, and the congressman not sitting there banging on the table. Because you know why? They don't know as much as you do. You know more than and that's what the power they hate. That's why the 60% of the American people in the CNN poll that didn't want to increase debt unless there were massive cuts, they don't want that. Dr. Navarro.
And just one point on this. I'm going to see you and I'm going to raise you one here. It's not that she didn't say that we're going to defend the dollar. She should have done that. But she should have said we're going to defend it against the attacks from communist China. And it's like the Pentagon doesn't recognize communist China as an existential threat. It's a competitor. Yellen, it's the word, it's Baltimore. It's the word that she will not speak. And this is the problem with the Biden regime. They're hopelessly compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, and we are not making the appropriate steps. You know, bottom line here is that there's a divergence between Wall Street's interests and Main Street's interests that's never been bigger. This is the Grand Canyon, because you got a stock market which is like, okay, it's like sort of chugging along. Although I'm thinking that this is about time that it's going to collapse. But Main Street, there's pain all over the place, Steve. You know that. I know it. The posse knows it.
Hang on. But as long as Biden could go, remember, we could think about this for a second. I want to burn this into your soul. We took the cap off. This is going to be $5-6 more trillion. The Politico's lead story: Blinken got his meeting.
Do it. McCarthy did it.
That we kowtowed. The Biden regime kowtowed enough. They're allowing Blinken, the head of the tributary states envoy, is going to go to kowtow in front of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, disgusting.
I tell you what, Navarro, I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold you through the break. I know you got a bunch, so I'm going to hold you through the break. Here's why. We're going to talk about the CCP, right?
Yeah.
She has told the people, harden up, baby. Something's coming. They've already started the unrestricted war has already ratcheted up. They're in China. They're in Cuba. It's not just electronic warfare to listen. This is full on cyber. They can hit the grid. They can hit everything. They are at war. This ain't a cold war for them. It's a hot war. And you've got Blinken. Yeah. We've done everything to kowtow prostate. Remember, the Secretary of Defense, the Ministry of Defense wouldn't even meet with Austin and Singapore. They do this is all about face. They are the Biden administration because they're compromised. They're compromised because of the cash that they took. The cash that they took. This is not about Donald Trump and his administrative thing with the National Archives. That's a misdirection play. It's not about the stupid whatever this payment was to the girl, or payment or not. That's all misdirection play to take away from their crimes and their crimes as they betray us to our enemies. Here's what Biden's doing in the kowtowing, in putting this country more and more jeopardy. Remember, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is as bad as the Cuban Missile Crisis because remember, today, cyber warfare, biological warfare is the new nuclear warfare. We had that whole confrontation over nukes, 90 miles from the United States and 90 seconds from Washington, D.C. Peter Navarro, the Biden, please remember this, folks. They lied. We had Andrew Mitchell on here the other day on her clip. They came on her show and looked her in the eye because she's a stooge. And this was Admiral Kirby lied. There's nothing going on there. That's a false report. Well, no. Just like the spy balloon, they will look you in the eye and lie because they understand what they're doing. Walk me through how dangerous Cuba is, brother.
See, this one hit me really hard. When I was a young boy among the servant class in Palm Beach, I actually lived right down the street from the Kennedy compound. 1962, they're building a bomb shelter nearby Peanut Island, and I'm in elementary school, like hiding underneath desks because we're worried about a Soviet attack. And I did a deep dive on this so-called spy outpost. This is the most serious existential threat we faced since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets were aiming nuclear missiles at us. That's like the old days. The new days are the cyber and electronic warfare. And all you have to do, Steve, is look at the South China Sea, where communist China has taken over islands and territories, built them up, and put on these elaborate electronic attack posts. And so what we face now, 90 miles from our shore, is the ability of communist China to disrupt and track all of our communications, to disrupt and misdirect shipping traffic if push comes to shove. If we have the contingency, they'll be able to better hit our electric grid, our rail systems, our water supplies. This is like an act of war.
Okay.
And for friggin' Biden to send Blinken on his friggin' knees to Beijing right now instead of pounding the table, we need JFK right now. Instead, we've got Neville Chamberlain. This like Steve Mnuchin was the Neville Chamberlain of our time, but Biden's outdoing him, Blinken's outdoing him, and Steve, this Cuba thing, it must not stand. It must not stand.
Because they can go offensive cyber war and biological war. They hit us from Wuhan.
Cyber and electronic.
Cuba. Peter, hit me with how they get to the Substack to get it. How they get to your content.
This one's on fire today in the Substack, peternavarro.substack.com, peternavarro.substack.com. And on Monday, I had a piece about how our democracy's turning into Pakistan because of what they're doing on Trump, peternavarro.substack.com. But please read this one on Cuba and send it to your friends because this can't stand, sir.
No, we want to make this go viral. Dr. Navarro, thank you very much.